Hello and welcome to Walking the Earth podcast. You can find us online at WTEpodcast.com. Please also be sure to subscribe to us on your favorite podcast compiler, iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, whatever you like. You can like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at WTE Podcast. I am Mike Margulies. Today I'm in Baltimore, Maryland, and our guest today is Becki Enright. Becki is in Athens, Greece. Becki, welcome aboard to the show.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Yeah.
On a podcast.
Yeah. It's awesome to finally get to chat with you. We tried to coordinate this call for a while, and finally got the logistics right.
Yeah, I'm just trying to work out how long it's been, like many months.
Yeah.
Finally.
But eventually we made it work.
We did.
So Becki, your website is bordersofadventure.com, and basically what you're going for is you go to destinations that have sort of that are misunderstood in different ways, and you try to change perceptions of these misunderstood places. I think you're also saying you go to places that maybe are well known, but try to find the hidden pieces of them as well. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's very much looking at things both with a social conscience. So what I do is I break down misconceptions that could be based on sort of societal, economic, political issues or like topical things in the media that give things a bad name. And yeah, it's very much about places that are misunderstood, and that can be on the one end of the scale, places like Iran, North Korea, Palestine, and on the other it can be, cities like Athens, where I live now, that post, or still the crisis of Greece. People think, if I come here, well, will I lose my money if I book a holiday here, or it has a bad reputation generally as a city, or it could be, a town or a country as a whole. And so I go and try and break down those misconceptions and look at why they exist and basically how those misconceptions translate to tourism. So why are people staying away, and what's true and what's not? And yeah, it's a mixture of those things. But yeah, it's not always the extreme end of the scale, even though I'm known for that. But it could be, it could be even Barcelona, for example. I keep hearing bad things about Barcelona. So, it's a mixture.
Yeah, I guess you can have every kind of city, and maybe even especially the big cities that are known, like they have a reputation, right?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I imagine that usually, almost in anything in life, even with like individual people too, right? Like you have some reputation or whatever. It's the story isn't necessarily the whole picture. Like the highlights aren't like the known things aren't the full depth of everything.
No.
So you're in Athens now. I mean, I don't know that much about Athens, but like, were there certain things that struck you specifically there?
Yeah, I came here last year, firstly on a blogger trip with some German bloggers and UK influencers too. And it was very much looking at the highlights of the city and looking at it as very pivotal to the recovery of the crisis in the country, being the capital city. And I loved it. It just struck me as a very artistic place. I love street art. I think lots of people come here expecting it to just entirely be this kind of classical Greek setup, a bit like I guess what you get mostly in Rome. And it isn't. There is, it's very gritty in parts and edgy, and I think you either see that as extremely dirty or you see it as a kind of a vibe, edginess, and that's how I took it. And I just do think it is a very misunderstood destination. It was perfect for me to write about, and I was called back for a project called I'm an Athenian, where I live locally, and was digging even deeper into what there is to do here, especially outside of the very central tourism points. And then I was like, I actually really like it, and I'm looking to slow down. I'm not ready to move back home. Obviously, when the Greek summer hits, it's going to be incredible. And there's going to be lots of islands and things to choose from. So, and I'm near the Middle East and Eastern Europe and the Balkans, which is the next part of the world I want to explore. So, all in all, perfect placement for me right now.
Yes. Oh, you can get deep into Greece and then also use it as a launching pad for the next spots. Yeah, I saw. I think this is your most recent post. Is it Skyros Island? Is that how you pronounce it?
Skiros. Yeah,
Skyros. Sorry,
Skiros.
I don't.
Yeah.
I don't pronounce my Greek is rough. But I was looking at this article and it's like it's really cool. Like there's these pictures of these dudes and it's like I don't know, like a Harry Potter almost. Like what are those guys in Harry Potter that fly around and stuff? Like these crazy looking
Oh, the
costumes.
Quidditch things or the oh no, you mean the night scary people?
Yeah, they remind me of that.
Yeah, they're not scary though. No, that was like that's just like another example of away from the kind of
Right.
extreme destination thing. Like everyone's just like Greece, glorious sunshine, great food, islands, which is how I was always. When I
Yeah.
came here years ago, every year I'd come to Greece every year in my 20s, and that's how I saw it. And then there's these incredible carnivals and things, and people don't know about that. So that's like another good example of looking at somewhere differently.
Right.
Yeah, so it was good fun.
And finding the hidden. Do you find that actually, since you've been abroad and you can now like you go to these places like Athens, or I guess this one place isn't actually Athens; it's another island. But generally, you're finding these hidden like off the beaten path sort of things. Does that also, when you come back home to the UK, do you find yourself now able to navigate better there and find yourself into like weirder, crazier things at home also?
Yeah, I think I've always been naturally curious. It's always been in me. I don't
Mm,
think it's always like just a result of the blog and writing. I think, yeah, obviously with that, I am more aware of what's going on around me, and I do more research and things like that. But I'm super curious and nosy, and I've always gone somewhere and within limits of safety, obviously, just wandered. And I always have a map on me, but I genuinely wander and don't look at that map until I
mm.
absolutely need to get back. So that's how I've always found things, even in China and places like I go to these big cities like Xi'an, and then I just wander, and then I'm suddenly in this quiet neighborhood and real life. And so yeah, I think it's always been in me to be like that.
Okay.
So it's helpful, but not always when you get lost.
Right. So you kind of always had that about. 'Cause I for me like after having traveled and I found myself into some off the beaten path, but definitely not to the extent that you have. But even for the traveling that I did, I found that it just changed my perception of home too, because the way I was traveling, the way I was exploring, I kind of took those learnings back with me, and now that I'm back in the States, it's like, oh, I'm finding my way into places and things and that I wouldn't have found my way into otherwise, because I like learned some of those skills from like just by being somewhere foreign, coming back with new eyes to my own home.
Yeah, I
So,
think it's a certain degree of confidence that comes with it, but
mm,
I don't even think it's even getting off the beaten track. I'm kind of finding that phrase is really overused now, and
right,
it used to be like, I mean, fine, there's people that do these fantastic treks that are just days long and in the wilderness, and I admire those people, and I love trekking, and there's certain things I would do too, but I think just to get into some back streets of a city or a different neighborhood isn't necessarily off the beaten track. It's
right.
actually just taking the time to just look a bit beyond the central tourism things and
Mm,
just open your mind a little bit. But yeah, I'm finding that phrase really kind of old now.
right.
And I think anybody can just grow their perspective just by having some patience and just being a bit more open minded.
Yeah, I hear you on that. Like, so it's not necessarily like you might be in a place that's known, not and quote unquote off the beaten path, but if you're just maybe going down a different street that's not the street with like the big destination, just going or just looking around you at what's
Yeah.
going on and like the taking attention to the details of things, you might find other things that aren't the things that are maybe celebrated widely, but you'll find very interesting, cool things maybe everywhere.
Yeah. And
Uh,
just sometimes even, when you go into, very local shops and things and just, where it feels comfortable, just striking up conversations, and just sometimes you find
yeah.
yourself learning things, and just all these little things that, sometimes you're on a tourist path, and you're there to see things and do things, and you go to the set places, and just sometimes these random conversations in themselves are just a beautiful part of the experience too.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Like that was a huge part of my experience traveling was, yeah, it wasn't so much about like seeing these landmarks or tourist destinations, but it was that random person I met on the street that I didn't expect,
Yeah.
didn't plan for, and then just get in that conversation. Wow, this is really interesting. I'm learning something. Then you get off in some adventure that you didn't plan.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like coming back to what I was like alluding to before a little bit. It's like I'm doing that here now. Like I'll just in Baltimore now. I'm better able to my mind and my is open to this experience more. So I'll go around and kind of maybe I'll talk to someone I wouldn't have talked to previously and
Yeah.
learn something new.
It definitely gives you confidence for sure, traveling.
Yeah. I think for sure there's something to say for just going into a place with that sort of open mind and being open to experience. You'll find a lot of gems just in the things that just
Yeah.
aren't the normal things, or the known things, quote unquote.
Yeah.
I'm also really interested to hear, in particular about Iran. Actually, I've never been to Iran myself, and that probably falls in the category, your niche, right, of a place that's misunderstood. In
Yeah.
particular, being here in the USA, there's a lot of things that come to mind about Iran. They're usually not positive. Actually, someone who's American watching the news, they have not very positive views. But when I talk to people who've been there, and I'd love to hear from you, like they have a very different perspective.
Yeah, I think another thing that I talk a lot about is that the problem we have with the Western media as well, and its dominance on the particular facts that it pulls out and the way that it creates stories, is that lots of people don't differentiate between the people of that country and their government. And that's a big thing I'm always saying, like even with my Israeli friends and Palestinian friends and Iranians and anybody from these countries that have these dominant governments or fascist governments or whatever's happening in these countries, that there's local people who are they have no choice but to be under that government. Like that's their country they live in, and that we as tourists, as visitors and travelers, we should go there and separate that and realize that there's people that are running businesses and who rely on tourism and who are really just nice people. And that's a big thing I try and get across, and it was the same with Iran. And it is true what you hear about the Iranian people. They are super welcoming, very lovely, very chatty, and they want to say to you, like, you're welcome here in our country, and we don't want these bad things said about us because we're not bad people. And that's what they'll do. They come and talk to you. And so for a country with a regime, it just completely blows your mind when you're on the ground. And as much as obviously that regime exists in law and order and religion and everything around, like those people couldn't be more welcoming. And obviously with the history there as well, I mean, it's just like one of the oldest civilization on Earth. And
oh, really?
And like the Persian Empire, and it's just incredible. And for all of the structures that exist there still, and that luckily haven't been destroyed. I mean, take somewhere like Syria, for example, where it's just disappearing. Iran still retains the ancient Persian heritage despite its modern government. So it's great. I mean, you still get to visit those things. It's basically ancient Persia versus a modern Iranian government. That's the juxtaposition that you get there, this ancient beauty, but an ideology in existence. So it's a very, very interesting place. And especially for what Americans, like you say, Americans were the only people that had to go there guided, and now British and Canadians have to go there too. I think something happened in Canada, and I don't know how the Brits got put on that list too. But anyway, all three of us have to be guided, whether you're in a group or you hire a guide with a minimum of 2 people, which is the law. So it's a shame. I personally couldn't move around freely, and
I didn't even know that was a thing.
It changed, I think, like a year and a half ago, for Brits and Canadians too. But so that's difficult when I'm so used to having the freedom just to do my own thing. But at the same time, I probably saw 3 weeks worth of solo travel in 2 weeks by having things set up for me. So there's pros and cons of that. But it's somewhere I definitely would go back to because it's such a huge country. and you have like all the mountainous areas and like the far west and the far east of the country. So there's so much more to see. So fingers crossed won't be too long until I go back.
Yeah, I think you can make it happen.
Yeah.
I think, all the things that you're saying are pretty consistent with what I've heard about Iran, like the people being so warm. And I've only ever heard positive things from people who've actually been to the country. Um,
Yeah.
so it's fun. That's very interesting. And, it's another thing I was thinking about from what you were saying, so if you're American or British, you have to be guided. Yeah, so it'd be nice to be able to go without that kind of restraint. But I can imagine if you're Iranian and you're trying to go to the U.S., you're gonna have an even harder time
Exactly.
trying to
Yeah.
visit. So when it's all considered, yeah, we got it pretty advantaged. And you know what, I'm thinking more, and you were also making a good point here. Separate the government from the people, and you can think about flip the perspective completely around. Imagine you're someone in Iran, and you look at the American or British government, and you might pass a judgment on Americans or English people based on what things
Yeah.
our governments do. But I don't necessarily think that reflects on an American or an English person.
Yeah.
Is weird.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's yeah, I think that's definitely important perspective to convey to people. Um, I mean, so do you have any other top destinations that come to mind, or top stories, things you'd love to share from your experiences?
I mean, my favorite places. I used to be like 3 or 4, but now it's probably about 10. But places that have really, I guess, stayed in my heart as a traveler is Burma. And
Mm,
again, the similar kind of situation, being misunderstood, and huge admiration for Aung San Suu Kyi, despite there's obviously complications politically with stuff, but that's different. And just I just think, like, again, the people there are lovely, and gorgeous landscape for a part of Southeast Asia that's still quite untouched.
mm,
And there's still, I think there's a lot of which I don't like, competition between travelers. Like, well, I went to Burma back in 1990 and I
right.
saw like 2 tourists. It's like, well, and then again, so then my perspective is, okay, well, we should be going there to support the people, because these people are now having the opportunity to open up a market stall or a restaurant or a
Right.
hotel or whatever. They've never had that money. They've never had that opportunity because it was military dominant, and the trade is open. And
Right.
so we should be helping them, not competing with each other about who saw the less tourists. I mean, sure, there's places in Burma you can go to that, there probably is one guest house. I did it myself.
Mm,
But, for me, it's this country's opening up. We need to support that and show them that the outside world is supporting them. So Burma is a really special place. I literally cried on the airplane when I left Burma
oh.
after a month. So I would definitely dying to get back there. And Cambodia I lived in for about 4 months, and I've been back a few times, and that's just somewhere that is kind of heartbreaking, but at the same time you fall in love with it. It's a
Right.
very unique pool, as you probably know yourself from being
Yep.
there. So yeah, Burma and Cambodia. And I found Israel and Palestine very interesting. Very, very interesting to see both sides of the coin on that,
Right.
and how utterly complex that situation is. And when you
Extremely complex.
very
Yeah.
and you come home and you can just spend hours and hours, and probably, I don't know, it could probably take you a year to wade through the history and the articles and the seminars and everything else on that region. So I think it's another place that's really important to go there yourself before you kick off online at the next intifada or whatever's going on in that country. I think it's a very important place to go to yourself.
Yeah.
And go to the Palestinian territories or the West Bank or whatever you want to call it, and go to Israel and meet some of the people on both sides and judge for yourself.
Yeah. I took a trip to Israel back in the day, actually. I'm Jewish, and so I got to go to Israel for free on this birthright trip. So basically the way it works is you get like 10 days there. It's like an organized trip. So I was on a bus with like 40 other young American Jews, basically, and we go around the country. I stayed like an extra week, and so the experience I had was obviously more geared toward the Israeli Jewish side of things.
Yes.
Although there wasn't really much commentary, to be honest, about like the conflict itself. It was more just like kind of seeing the country and seeing what it's like there. But from what I understand, and I'm not obviously like completely the most first person in the whole thing, but it's like every conflict in the world. There's two sides to everything, and you know,
Yeah.
I would say my personal opinion about wars and conflicts in general is sort of like, it's very easy to identify bad guys, to look at the other person in any conflict, and each side's going to say, well, this is what the other person did wrong. And we
Yeah.
all, in our own heads, we all think we're Bruce Willis. We all think we're the hero, and so if you're Bruce Willis, you can do anything you want. You're allowed to kill people. You're allowed to do it because we all cheer when he kills the terrorist at the end of the movie, and that's
Yeah.
because you're Bruce Willis. And so in everyone's mind, I'm Bruce Willis. And then we end up, just my thoughts. Everyone thinks they're the hero, and so therefore the other person's the bad guy.
Yeah.
But in the ideal world, though, we'd all just love each other.
Of course. Of course.
But,
Yeah. I'm trying to think where else. I also give a lot of love to Taiwan. I think in that kind of region where Japan, which is also one of the most incredible places that everybody should save to go to Japan and Lapland, like in their lifetime. There's like the two places I would say are like dream destinations that you should put money aside for every month to one day go to. But I think in that region, Japan kind of overshadows everything else. So I found South Korea quite boring, for example. And then there's Taiwan, and Taiwan's just really starting to be on the radar now, and they do lots of cool tourism campaigns and starting to be quite known. And it's a really special place, and I look at it as like how China would be if China didn't have all of its particular ways. It's probably a polite way of putting it. So if you want to see like a kind of a good example of how China could be without its particular things that it does, Taiwan's a good example. And the people are very much, we're Taiwanese, we're not Chinese.
right.
We were Chinese heritage, but we're Taiwanese. They're very,
Right.
very, very proud. And again, like very welcoming, very, very welcoming.
Yeah,
so
similar
Taiwan's a
in
great
Hong
place.
Kong, they also have a very distinct identity as well. Like they don't they distinguish themselves from Chinese. And
Absolutely,
that's
very
interesting.
separate.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
Hong Kong's a great place, and the same with Nepal. Nepal, I think, again, is another place I would tell everyone to put to top of their list, and very much a kind of a more accessible India kind of landscape. And obviously you have Everest Base Camp and Annapurna Trek Circuit, so it's an incredible place if you love nature and hiking. So that's my
Yeah.
top picks really, and they've stayed the same for like the past year. I think those kind of Asia's in my heart. Middle East is somewhere I'm exploring more, and obviously now being in like the kind of eastern end of Europe, I guess it all fits with how I write and the kind of stories that I look to find too.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you mentioned all these places, like diverse locations and all kinds of places in the world. And I think it goes to show like there's some beauty pretty much everywhere in the world you can go. You can go all these different
Yeah.
regions and you're going to find something awesome. And like the places that you've mentioned that I've been, like Cambodia, I'll agree with everything you said. It's like, yeah, there's an amazing experience there. And there is obviously there's the history you mentioned of the genocide that happened with the Khmer Rouge, but there's this welcoming, beautiful warmth there to the people, and they're very happy.
Yeah.
It's just amazing atmosphere, and the places that you mentioned I haven't been. You kind of are seconding all the wonderful things I've heard about them all. And
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's some travelers, they go somewhere and they're it's not having an open mind and wanting things to be easy, which is fine. That's why some people do choose just to have relaxing beach type holidays, because it is easy and without hassle. But if you go to these places, you have to be prepared for the long journeys and the long waiting times, and the fact that the food might not be great, or the cleanliness might not be up to standard. But like, if you're gonna go somewhere and you purposely find something to moan about, you're not gonna have an
Right.
open enough mind to find these beautiful experiences. And
Yeah.
and then you think it's a reflection on the country, and it's not. Sometimes it's actually a reflection on the person's outlook,
Yes,
not
absolutely.
the country. So Yeah, just go with the flow is what I say. Don't over plan and don't over expect things to be perfect because
Yeah. That's like the golden rule
nothing
of backpacking, right?
nothing is perfect. Like I said today, it's rained so much in Athens. I kind of feel like my whole life I've just assumed that Greece was sunny all the time and it's not. No, nothing is perfect.
I mean, you can find the beauty in whatever, like you're saying. Yeah, I think if you're going in anywhere with like an expectation, it's so high, or you are looking for problems to have, you're going to find problems if you're looking for
Yeah,
problems. But
yeah,
if you're open to experience, and it sounds like it's kind of a general theme to this conversation and maybe your blog as well. It's like, if you're open to experience, you come to a place, you'll navigate your way into some beautiful, amazing things.
yeah,
And so, yeah,
absolutely.
and that's true. I think traveling. That's true with life. Um, you all the things.
And
So
I think it's just not sugarcoating things. So I think there's some people think that all travel is going to be this dreamy experience, and I gotta like open my heart and my mind to everything, and everything's going to be great. And it's not. Sometimes it's the shit that happens on the road that's actually sometimes the things that stick with you or make you learn from stuff. And yeah, it's just being prepared to take that on too. And sometimes that negativity or bad experience does come from something that's political or social, economical, and it hits you a bit like we say in Cambodia when sometimes you just can't do anything about that situation to help those people. You can't, but you can't walk away from a situation like that and say, oh, that country's bad because that's happened, like that particular thing
yeah,
is happening because it's not found the people. And but yeah, you have to take the rough with the smooth, and not all travel is dreamy, and I never sugarcoat anything. If you look on my Facebook page today, for example, like I've shared 2 pieces of like bad news. Like I try and give my readers like, oh, isn't it a shame that 24 sites in Syria have been destroyed because of the war and this awful kind of news happening in the aviation industry. I'm not always going to post the most dreamy things about travel because we have to learn from the other things as well.
absolutely. I definitely agree with you. Yeah, like that's you see the things that are maybe the bad things that you would say have happened in a country's history or are happening now, and also you might go through an experience personally when you're traveling that was not necessarily desirable, but like that is also just as much part of the experience. Yeah, like you said, we learn from these things, and that's so it's really just as important of a thing, for sure.
Yeah.
Um, so for you, Becki, something that you haven't mentioned already. What's something you would like to do in your life that you haven't done yet?
What travel
Anything at
related?
all. It doesn't have to be travel related. It
Oh
can be anything in the universe or in your imagination.
gosh, that's a bit insane. Hmm. I mean, there's always the extreme things like I really want to go to Antarctica, or like I was thinking,
Hmm.
oh, you can trek across the North Pole. That would be really fun. There's always those extreme things in my mind that I will
Yeah.
always be open to. And if there was ever that chance of doing that kind of space travel where like you don't go that far, but you might just go outside of the Earth's
The
atmosphere, that kind
stratosphere
of
or something.
yeah, that would be like I would totally do that too. But only when maybe it's completely safe and other people have done it.
Yeah,
I
someone
don't
else
want to
could
be
be the
one of the
test subject for it.
yeah, and I'm not really best friends with Richard Branson, so I'm not kind of on that list to go with
Right.
him.
On what is it, Virgin Space or something? Uh,
Virgin Galactic or
Virgin
something, yeah.
Galactic.
And it's like I don't know, Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie are on it, all those other people, but I'm not a part of that group, so it's not
well,
gonna happen.
well, it's very possible that in our lifetimes, travel to space will be possible, even affordable. Like we're talking, like let's say, what's the world gonna be like in say 50 years? Um,
Exactly. I think it will happen for sure.
yeah, so we could very well be able to go to space in our lifetimes, and be able to even afford it possibly. I mean, it probably won't be cheap, but it might be still if you save up a bit, be able to hit the moon or something. Who knows? Um,
Yeah, you never know. Never say never.
they're
But
sending people to Mars soon, aren't they?
I just kind of I'm completely lost with it. There's just seems to be different things all the time. But another thing I always say, it's always been a bit of a joke that so one of my favorite words is revolution,
All
but
right.
not in the sense of all of, the bad revolutions that have caused these despicable regimes to come about, but in terms of great change. So I always have this quote that I used to use on my Facebook. It still might be there, which is, would one day like to start a revolution for something. I know what that something is. So in terms of a big, I don't even want to dream or ambition, is that one day just some kind of movement or revolution or revolutionary idea, whether it could be in travel or something societal or whatever, well, I can be a part of that.
Maybe it's a revolution of consciousness.
Quite possibly.
And maybe that's an evolution.
Oh, it's just good. Yeah, it's just like a bad science lesson.
I would love to be part of an evolution. Yeah, I mean, it's a really cool goal. I mean, I definitely relate to that. I'd like to be part of, I don't know, I guess for me, like just some positive change in the world.
Yeah.
I'd like to be part.
And it always comes back to there's that great Gandhi quote, isn't it? Like,
be the change you want to see in the world.
See in the world. Yeah.
Yep,
and it's exactly that. And I don't want to sit here and be like, oh, I just have all these dreamy ideas of the world being a better place. Like, no, be a part of it. And
right.
for me, like, I'm not saying that the work I do is that the best or the most perfect, but I want to feel that my work is making a change, or at least bridging a divide between this over kind of sexy sugar-coated tourism versus sensationalist journalism. That I want to reach out to my readers as a normal person traveling, not as a journalist that's potentially bound by rules of a publication, and not as somebody who just wants to see the best in everything, but has that educational approach to make people see things differently. And to me, like, that's my way of contributing to what I feel is like a need to see people who live under these difficult situations, and to not pass judgment so easily in travel, all related to travel and tourism and that industry.
Yeah, I think you're doing it. You are doing a part, and you are helping, and you're helping to spread information, good information that is helpful to people, and lets people to understand the world around them, or parts of the world that they aren't familiar with, a little bit better, and maybe even make it more relatable. And I think you're doing a part in that. So yeah, you're definitely doing a good thing. You're helping
Thanks.
a revolution of some sort, I think.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hopefully I'm helping in some small way as well. Just helping, maybe just being a good person, helping to make the world nice. I like to think I'm helping as well in some way. It's a good goal to have.
It is.
Awesome. This is a really cool chat. Folks that are looking to find you, obviously, as I mentioned, your website is bordersofadventure.com. You're also on Facebook, Twitter, all that good stuff too, yeah?
Yeah, Instagram, Pinterest, everywhere. So yeah,
Awesome.
They're all same, Borders of Adventure.
Okay, cool. So what I'll do, as I always do, is I will compile all of the different social media links to you on the show notes, the blog post write-up that will go along with this episode. So folks who are listening and you want to find Becki on all of social medias and Instagram and everything, check out WTEpodcast.com. You'll find it there, or you can get to her site, bordersofadventure.com directly, and your links are at the top of your site as well.
Yes.
So you can find Becki, read about all of her various adventures and perspectives on her travels. Recommend checking that out. Please do. And for us at Walking the Earth Podcast, again, you can subscribe to us on iTunes, SoundCloud, or Stitcher. Wherever you're hearing this, you can probably subscribe. We're on Facebook as well, and Twitter at WTE Podcast. But all this information for find Becki and our show is at WTEpodcast.com. And so, Becki, thank you again for coming on.
Thank you very much. It has indeed.
And thank you, folks, for listening. We will catch you next time.
Next time on Walking the Earth podcast, Mike talks with traveling duo Kashan Patel and Daniel Lawson about their travels in Southeast Asia and other parts of the world. Tune in and check it out online next time at WTEpodcast.com.